Sarah Mitchell stared at the glass walls of her corner office on the 47th floor, watching the city buzz below like ants in a colony. At 38, she had built Tech Vision Solutions from a small startup in her garage to a billion-dollar empire with over 5,000 employees across 12 countries. The company's latest quarterly earnings had just shattered all previous records, yet she felt completely empty inside. Her phone buzzed with another congratulatory message from an investor, but Sarah couldn't bring herself to read it. 3 weeks had passed since the funeral, but the image of her best friend Emma's casket being lowered into the ground still haunted her every waking moment. Emma had been more than a friend. She was Sarah's anchor, the one person who remembered her before the success, before the money, before the endless board meetings and corporate decisions that now defined her existence. The irony wasn't lost on her that on the same day Emma died in a car accident, Sarah had been in a boardroom celebrating the acquisition of their biggest competitor. While she was toasting with champagne, her childhood friend was taking her last breath in a hospital bed, alone. The guilt gnawed at Sarah's chest like a physical weight she couldn't shake off. Emma had called her that morning, excited about something trivial. A new recipe she wanted to try for their weekly dinner that had been postponed for months due to Sarah's increasingly demanding schedule. "I know you're busy building your empire," Emma had laughed, "but promise me we'll make time soon." Sarah had promised, the way she always did, knowing full well that another urgent meeting or crisis would likely interfere. Now, as Sarah sat in her leather chair worth more than most people's annual salaries, she realized that all her achievements felt meaningless without Emma there to share them with. The woman who had believed in her when she was just a broke college student with a crazy idea about revolutionizing software solutions was gone forever. Emma had been there through every late night of coding, every rejected pitch, every small victory that led to this moment of ultimate professional success. The intercom crackled to life, and her assistant's voice filled the office. "Ms. Mitchell, the board is waiting for you in conference room A. The merger presentation is scheduled to begin in 5 minutes." Sarah looked at the stack of documents on her desk, papers that would finalize the biggest deal in the company's history, potentially adding another $2 billion to their valuation. Instead of reaching for the papers, Sarah found herself opening her desk drawer and pulling out a faded photograph. It showed her and Emma at their college graduation, both grinning widely with their arms around each other. Emma's handwritten note on the back read, "Whatever happens, don't forget who you are underneath all that success." The words hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. She realized she had been so focused on climbing higher and achieving more that she had lost sight of everything that truly mattered. The relationships she had sacrificed, the experiences she had missed, the simple joys she had postponed for some mythical future when she would finally have enough success to be happy. But Emma's death had shattered that illusion completely. The boardroom door felt impossibly heavy as Sarah finally walked toward it, her mind racing with thoughts that had nothing to do with profit margins or market expansion. For the first time in years, she found herself questioning not just what she was doing, but why she was doing it. The empire she had built suddenly felt like a beautiful prison, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she was suffocating inside its golden walls. The merger presentation went exactly as planned. Sarah delivered her pitch with the same commanding presence that had made her one of the most respected CEOs in the tech industry. Charts filled with impressive numbers danced across the screen, and the board members nodded approvingly as she outlined their path to dominating yet another market sector. But throughout the entire 2-hour meeting, Sarah felt like she was watching herself from outside her body, going through the motions of a life that no longer felt like her own. After the meeting ended and congratulations were exchanged, Sarah retreated to her office and did something she hadn't done in 15 years. She canceled all her appointments for the rest of the week. Her assistant Michelle looked genuinely shocked when Sarah gave her the instruction. "Are you feeling all right, Ms. Mitchell? You have the Forbes interview tomorrow and the Venture Capital Summit on Thursday." "Cancel everything," Sarah repeated, quietly staring out at the city skyline. "Tell them I have a family emergency." It wasn't entirely a lie. Emma had been the closest thing to family she had left, and losing her had created an emergency in Sarah's soul that no amount of professional success could fix. That evening, Sarah found herself standing outside Emma's apartment building, holding the spare key her friend had given her years ago for emergencies. The hallway smelled like the vanilla candles Emma always burned, and Sarah's hands trembled as she unlocked the door to the small but cozy space that had been her friend's sanctuary. Emma's apartment was the complete opposite of Sarah's sterile penthouse. Books were scattered everywhere, plants overflowed from every windowsill, and photographs covered every available surface. Sarah picked up frame after frame, seeing memories she had forgotten about. There they were at Emma's 30th birthday party, which Sarah had almost missed due to a last-minute client call. Another photo showed them hiking last autumn, one of the few times Sarah had actually kept a personal commitment. In Emma's bedroom, Sarah discovered something that made her heart stop. On the nightstand was a journal, open to an entry dated just 1 week before the accident. Emma's familiar handwriting covered the page. "I'm worried about Sarah. She seems so lost in her success that she's forgotten how to just be happy. I remember when we used to dream about changing the world together, not just making money. I hope someday she realizes that all the achievements in the world don't mean anything if you don't have people to share them with." Sarah sank onto Emma's bed, clutching the journal to her chest as tears flowed freely for the first time since the funeral. Her friend had seen through the facade that fooled everyone else. While the business world celebrated Sarah as a visionary leader, Emma had recognized the truth, that somewhere along the way, Sarah had lost herself completely. The next morning, Sarah woke up on Emma's couch, still wearing her expensive business suit from the day before. Sunlight streamed through windows adorned with Emma's collection of colorful scarves, and for a moment, Sarah felt a peace she hadn't experienced in years. This small apartment held more warmth and genuine happiness than her luxurious penthouse ever had. Her phone had been buzzing constantly with urgent messages from her team, but Sarah found herself completely indifferent to whatever crises required her immediate attention. Instead, she spent the morning reading Emma's journal, discovering page after page of dreams her friend had nurtured, while Sarah had been busy conquering the corporate world. Emma had wanted to travel to small villages in South America to teach children. She had plans to write a novel about friendship and forgiveness. She had hoped to adopt a rescue dog and maybe find love with someone who appreciated her gentle spirit. All of these dreams were now impossible, cut short by a moment of careless driving on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Meanwhile, Sarah had achieved everything she had ever wanted professionally, but realized she couldn't name a single personal dream she was actively pursuing. Success had become her only ambition, and the pursuit of more success, her only goal. By Thursday morning, Sarah's absence had created chaos at TechVision Solutions. Her phone showed 47 missed calls from her CFO, David, and her inbox overflowed with urgent messages marked with red exclamation points. The company's stock price had dipped slightly when news leaked that their CEO had mysteriously canceled high-profile meetings, sparking rumors about her health and the stability of the company. When Sarah finally returned to the office, David was waiting in her reception area, pacing like a caged animal. "Sarah, thank God you're here. The board is demanding explanations. The Forbes journalist flew in from New York specifically for your interview, and the Henderson Group is threatening to pull out of the merger if they don't get reassurance about your commitment." Sarah listened to his concerns with a strange sense of detachment, as if he were describing problems belonging to someone else entirely. The urgency that would have sent her into overdrive just a week ago now seemed almost comically trivial. "Schedule a board meeting for this afternoon," she said calmly. "I need to address some things." David's relief was palpable. "Great. I'll have Michelle prepare the usual quarterly reports and projections. Should we focus on the Henderson merger or the new product launch timeline?" "Neither," Sarah replied, walking past him into her office. "I have something more important to discuss." The boardroom felt different when Sarah entered that afternoon. The 12 members of TechVision's board of directors sat around the polished mahogany table, their faces showing a mixture of concern and impatience. These were some of the most powerful people in the tech industry, individuals whose approval and support had helped her build her empire. But as Sarah looked at each face, she realized she barely knew them as human beings. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah began, standing at the head of the table where she had delivered countless presentations about growth strategies and market dominance. "I want to thank you for your patience during my recent absence. I know my unavailability has created some uncertainty, and you deserve an explanation." Board Chairman Robert Chen leaned forward expectantly. "We're just glad you're feeling better, Sarah. Whatever personal matter required your attention, we hope it's resolved so we can move forward with our expansion plans." Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would shock everyone in the room. "The personal matter isn't resolved, Robert. In fact, it's led me to a decision that will affect all of us. I've decided to step down as CEO of Tech Vision Solutions." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah watched as the board members processed her words, their expressions shifting from confusion to alarm to barely controlled panic. Margaret Walsh, the board's longest-serving member, was the first to speak. "Sarah, you can't be serious. You're having an emotional reaction to whatever happened. Take a few more days off, see a counselor if necessary, but don't make any rash decisions." "This isn't a rash decision," Sarah replied steadily. "I've built this company into everything I dreamed it could be, but I've lost myself in the process. I recently lost my closest friend, and it made me realize that I've been so focused on professional success that I've completely neglected the things that actually make life worth living." David, who had been sitting quietly in the corner taking notes, dropped his pen. "Sarah, you're talking about walking away from a billion-dollar company. Think about what you're saying. Think about the shareholders, the employees, the customers who depend on us." "I am thinking about them," Sarah said. "That's exactly why I'm doing this. This company deserves a leader who's fully committed to its mission, someone who can give it the passion and dedication it requires. Right now, I can't be that person. I don't even know who I am anymore outside of this role." The room erupted into a chorus of protests and attempted negotiations. Board members offered sabbaticals, reduced responsibilities, therapy resources, anything to keep her from making what they saw as a catastrophic mistake. But Sarah had made up her mind. For the first time in years, she felt absolutely certain about a major life decision. She would stay long enough to ensure a smooth transition, help identify and train her successor, and make sure the company remained stable. But her time as the driving force behind Tech Vision Solutions was coming to an end, and despite the chaos her announcement had created, Sarah felt lighter than she had in decades. News of Sarah's resignation leaked within hours, sending shockwaves through the tech industry. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls from journalists, competitors trying to poach key employees, and industry leaders expressing either concern or barely concealed excitement about potential opportunities. The business news channels ran stories speculating about her mental health, hidden scandals, or secret plans to start a rival company. Sarah ignored most of the attention, focusing instead on the complex process of transitioning her responsibilities. She worked closely with the board to identify potential successors, eventually settling on David as interim CEO while they conducted a formal search. Despite his initial shock, David proved capable of handling the immediate demands of leadership, though he continued to express hope that Sarah would change her mind. The hardest part wasn't dealing with the media frenzy or the board's ongoing attempts to convince her to stay. It was facing her employees, many of whom she had hired personally, and who looked at her with a mixture of admiration and bewilderment. During an all-hands meeting, a young software engineer named Kevin raised his hand and asked the question everyone was thinking. "Ms. Mitchell, you've built something incredible here. How do you just walk away from your life's work?" Sarah considered the question carefully before answering. "Kevin, I used to think this company was my life's work, and in many ways it has been an incredible achievement that I'm proud of. But I've realized that my actual life's work should be about more than just building a successful business. It should be about building meaningful relationships, contributing to my community, and finding ways to make a positive impact that goes beyond profit margins." After the meeting, Sarah found herself staying late in her office, not to work on urgent projects as she had done thousands of times before, but simply to absorb the reality of what she was leaving behind. The walls were covered with awards, framed magazine covers featuring her face and photographs from company milestones. But missing from this shrine to professional success were pictures of friends, family, or personal achievements that had nothing to do with Tech Vision Solutions. Her assistant, Michelle, knocked softly on the door. "Ms. Mitchell, I wanted to thank you for everything you've taught me over the past 5 years. Working for you has been the highlight of my career so far." "Michelle, you've been incredible," Sarah replied genuinely. "I hope you know that your success here has nothing to do with me and everything to do with your own talent and dedication." "Can I ask you something personal?" Michelle said hesitantly. "Are you scared? Walking away from all of this without knowing what comes next?" Sarah smiled for what felt like the first time in weeks. "Terrified," she admitted. "But it's a different kind of fear than I've been living with. I've been afraid of failure, afraid of not living up to expectations, afraid of not being successful enough for so long that I forgot there are other things worth being afraid of. Now I'm afraid of wasting whatever time I have left, afraid of never truly connecting with another person, afraid of dying without having really lived." That weekend, Sarah began the process of dismantling her carefully constructed CEO lifestyle. She put her penthouse apartment on the market, donated most of her expensive business wardrobe to charity, and sold her collection of luxury cars. Each item she let go of felt like shedding a layer of armor she no longer needed. On Sunday afternoon, she found herself back at Emma's apartment, which she had been slowly cleaning out. Hidden in a closet, she discovered a box of letters Emma had never sent, dozens of notes addressed to various people expressing gratitude, love, forgiveness, and hopes for the future. Many of them were addressed to Sarah, filled with memories of their friendship and gentle encouragement about finding balance in life. One letter, dated just 2 months before Emma's death, contained a passage that made Sarah's heart ache. "I know you think I don't understand the pressure you're under or the importance of what you're building. But I worry that you're so busy becoming who you think you should be that you're forgetting who you actually are. Remember when we were kids and you wanted to be a teacher? You said you wanted to help people learn and grow. In some ways, you're doing that now, but I wonder if you've lost sight of the helping part in favor of the growing part." Sarah carefully folded the letter and placed it in her purse. Emma had been right, as usual. The girl who had once dreamed of nurturing young minds had become a woman obsessed with nurturing quarterly earnings. But maybe it wasn't too late to find her way back to that original desire to help people, even if she wasn't sure yet what form that help might take. 3 months after her resignation became official, Sarah found herself in a small coffee shop in Vermont, a place she had never visited despite living only a few hours away for most of her adult life. She had spent the past weeks traveling without agenda, staying in bed and breakfast instead of 5-star hotels, eating at local diners instead of Michelin-starred restaurants, and talking to strangers instead of networking with industry contacts. Chiatter coffee shop was owned by an elderly couple, Tom and Linda, who had moved to Vermont after Tom's retirement from teaching high school mathematics for 37 years. Sarah had been coming here every morning for a week, drawn by the genuine warmth of the owners and the lack of recognition her face received in this small town where tech industry news held little relevance. "You seem different today," Linda observed as she refilled Sarah's coffee cup. "More relaxed, maybe?" Sarah smiled, realizing that Linda was right. For the first time in years, she had woken up without immediately checking her phone for urgent messages or reviewing her schedule for the day. "I think I'm starting to remember what it feels like to just exist without constantly doing something productive." "Ah," Tom said from behind the counter, where he was handwriting the day's specials on a small chalkboard. "You're learning the difference between being busy and being alive." That afternoon, Sarah volunteered at the local elementary school, helping third graders with their reading. She had responded to a flyer on the coffee shop's bulletin board, drawn by an opportunity that required no resume, no references, and no demonstration of leadership skills, just a willingness to sit with children and help them discover the joy of books. 8-year-old Mia struggled with a story about a brave princess who saved her kingdom not through magic or strength, but through kindness and wisdom. As Sarah helped Mia sound out difficult words, she found herself genuinely excited about each small breakthrough. each moment when understanding dawned in the child's eyes. This feeling was completely different from the satisfaction she had felt when closing major business deals, though she couldn't immediately articulate why. During her lunch break, Sarah called her younger brother Jake, someone she had barely spoken to in the past 2 years due to her demanding schedule. Jake was a social worker in Portland, earning a fraction of what Sarah had made but seemingly happier than she had ever been during her corporate success. "I keep waiting for you to tell me this is all some elaborate publicity stunt," Jake said, when she explained her recent life changes. "The Sarah I know doesn't just walk away from a billion-dollar empire to volunteer at elementary schools." "Maybe that's the problem," Sarah replied. "Maybe the Sarah you know isn't really me at all. Maybe I've been playing a role for so long that I forgot it was supposed to be temporary." Jake was quiet for a moment before responding. "You know, when we were kids, you used to make up elaborate stories and act them out for hours. You'd be a doctor saving lives, then a teacher inspiring students, then an explorer discovering new worlds. But you were never just playing businesswoman. That character came later, when you decided you needed to be serious and successful." That evening, Sarah sat in her modest motel room, surrounded by the few possessions she had kept after selling most of her belongings. Emma's journal lay open on the small desk, and Sarah found herself writing in it for the first time, adding her own thoughts to her friend's reflections on life and meaning. "Emma," she wrote, "I think I understand now what you meant about not forgetting who I am underneath all that success. The problem wasn't that I became successful. It was that I let success become all I was. I stopped being a person who happened to run a company and became a company that happened to be run by a person. I don't know what comes next, but for the first time in years I'm excited to find out." As she prepared for bed, Sarah realized she felt genuinely tired in a way she hadn't experienced in years. The satisfying exhaustion that comes from doing meaningful work rather than the bone-deep fatigue that results from constant stress and pressure. Tomorrow she would return to the elementary school, help more children discover the magic of reading, and continue the process of discovering who she was when she wasn't trying to be anyone in particular. The uncertainty that had terrified her just months ago now felt like possibility. She had stepped away from everything that had defined her, and instead of finding emptiness, she was beginning to discover a fullness she had never known existed. 1 year after leaving Tech Vision Solutions, Sarah stood in front of a room filled with 20 adults who had gathered for the first meeting of her new venture, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping successful professionals navigate major life transitions. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was once again leading a startup, but this time the mission had nothing to do with profit margins or market dominance. "I know what it's like to achieve everything you thought you wanted and still feel completely lost," Sarah told the group, which included former executives, retired athletes, and others who had found themselves questioning their purpose after reaching the pinnacle of their careers. Success can be just as disorienting as failure, sometimes more so, because we're not supposed to feel empty when we have everything. The organization, which Sarah had named Second Chapter, in honor of Emma's belief that life offers multiple opportunities for reinvention, operated out of a converted community center in Burlington. Sarah had used a portion of her Tech Vision earnings to fund the initial setup, but kept her own financial involvement minimal, preferring to raise money through grants and donations from others who understood the importance of the work. Among the group was Marcus, a former professional baseball player struggling with retirement, and Jennifer, a surgeon who had burned out after 20 years of saving lives but losing herself in the process. Sarah listened to their stories with the same attention she had once devoted to quarterly earnings reports, but this time her focus came from genuine care rather than professional obligation. "The hardest part," Jennifer shared, "is that everyone expects you to be grateful for what you've accomplished. And I am grateful, but I'm also lost. I don't know who I am if I'm not Dr. Jennifer, who works 80 hours a week and saves lives." Sarah nodded, remembering her own struggle with identity after stepping away from her CEO role. "I think the problem is that we become our achievements instead of having our achievements. We stop being people who do important work and start being the work itself. The path back to ourselves isn't about rejecting what we've accomplished. but about remembering that we exist independently of our accomplishments. After the meeting, Sarah walked through Burlington's downtown area, a route that had become her favorite evening ritual. She rented a small apartment above a bookstore, a space that would have horrified her former self with its modest size and lack of luxury amenities. But the apartment felt like home in a way her penthouse never had, filled with books, plants, and photographs of the new relationship she was building. Her phone buzzed with a text from David, who had successfully transitioned. From interim CEO to permanent leader of Tech Vision Solutions, the company was thriving under his leadership, having just announced another record-breaking quarter and the successful launch of 3 innovative products. "Still can't believe you walked away from all this," his message read, "but I have to admit you seem happier than I've ever seen you." Sarah smiled as she typed her response. "Different kinds of success require different kinds of courage. You're exactly where you need to be, and so am I." That evening, Sarah sat at her small kitchen table writing thank you notes to the volunteers who had helped with Second Chapter's first fundraising event. The handwritten notes were a far cry from the automated emails and corporate communications that had once filled her days, but the personal touch felt important for work that was fundamentally about human connection. As she sealed the final envelope, Sarah caught sight of Emma's photograph on her bookshelf, the same graduation picture she had kept in her desk drawer during her final days at Tech Vision. But now the image served a different purpose. Instead of reminding her of loss, it represented the friendship that had ultimately guided her back to herself. "I think you'd like what I'm doing now," Sarah said quietly to the photograph. "It's not about building an empire or conquering markets, it's just about helping people find their way back to who they really are, underneath all their achievements. I finally understand that the best kind of success isn't about what you build, but about who you become while you're building it." Outside her window, the lights of Burlington twinkled like a constellation of possibilities. Sarah had no idea what the next chapter of her life would bring, but for the first time in years, she was genuinely excited to find out. She had learned that walking away from everything you've built isn't the end of your story. Sometimes it's the beginning of the story you were always meant to tell.